billions of years of evolution. The many forms of life on Earth have woven their destinies together. They integrate, split, prosper, and perish. That includes us humans, who influence and in turn are influenced by this planet. Woo! 3 scientific teams traversing into the frontier environment.
600米，然后一直到7、8千米，那你就可以从热带一直到寒带。
To explore the breadth of life.
我们就要究竟这个地方究竟有多少物种，哪些物种分布的状况怎么样。
Dive deep into the network of life to decipher the codes of species.
我就能看到到底是基因组层面上哪些基因发生了变化，使得它能够快速的适应下来。
Use the most cutting-edge technology to tackle ancient mysteries.
地质历史时期这种生物多样性的大规模的审视，到底是一个什么样的过程？
And to find out how life can blossom in the most unexpected places, in the most extraordinary ways. Right here, in this land of diversity.
世界的屋脊，就大部分最高的山都在我们讲的这个泛喜马拉雅这个范围。东边算起啊，是横断山，然后在喜马拉雅山，再往西就是克拉昆仑。
我们地球上高等植物大约有30多万种，在中国有3万多种，在泛喜马地区有2万多种。
我们的边界上是600米，然后一直到7、8千米，那你就可以从热带一直到寒带。
不管是欧洲、非洲、北美、南美，都找不到这样的一片环境了。这里的生境多样化，它才会有适应不同生境的植物出现。
But supporting this plant kingdom are the youngest mountain ranges in the world. They're also among the most geologically unstable regions on this planet.
泥石流、地震频发吧，稻根火种也很严重，乱采乱挖也很严重，所以这个地方生物多样性处于一种危险的境地。
这片区域的研究是非常薄弱的，物种界定的清不清楚，它的植物多样性到底是什么样子的？
我们就要究竟这个地方究竟有多少物种，哪些物种分布的状况怎么样。
我叫王强，主要是在从事泛喜马地区的一个植物志的编研工作。这喜马拉雅隆起的时间有那么几千万年，它是一个很年轻的一个山脉。物种的形成伴随着山脉的形成，伴随着造山运动的作用吧。
Tens of millions of years ago, the Indian subcontinent crashed into Eurasian plate. Continental crust is thrust up in the process of mountain formation. After twisting and breaking, the thickest parts of the crust became the world's tallest mountain ranges. But at relatively thin and fragile places, out came water that eventually became rivers. Currents raced downwards, while mountains grew taller, like two mighty forces locked in a competition. Rivers with smaller volumes lost out to the upward tectonic movement and became trapped by the mountains. They then formed lakes, decorating the plateau like precious jewels. Others, with more forceful currents, carved out different paths, and majestic canyons were formed. Water from the Indian and Pacific Oceans rushed into the deep valleys, below inhospitable, frozen fortresses to nourish an extraordinary world.
在泛喜马地区，也不光是有雪山、冰川，也有很多的森林，甚至有雨林，这是大家想不到的。
鸡蛋饿鸡肉鸡蛋吃吧。
从这儿往定日定节走，要走康普温泉，从这儿上去。因为视角不一样嘛。行吧，行，那就这样啊。好，啊，注意安全啊。
我第一次进藏也是跟着马队。10年我第一次进藏。他是一个很熟悉植物，还熟悉路况，还熟悉就是这边的所有的风土人情，他都熟悉。
我们每年进藏采集植物标本，是为后续志书编辑《泛喜马拉雅植物志》提供一个最基本的一个标本的引证的一个工作。像我们每年有不同的区域的科考，像去年是林芝地区，今年是主要是日喀则地区。
慢点啊，马队。
This plant kingdom hidden in Himalaya is vast, but not all are considered ideal for botanical research.
这是鼠尾草，已经到了果期了。
这是咱们要找那个吗？
就是它，就是很可惜，花儿掉了，看影响能找到一个开花的不？
这个
对，
是吗？
这是它的花萼，花冠已经掉了。
就是没有花了，是吧？
对，花冠已经谢了，花冠谢了就果实在里面就在发育，小坚果。有这个花我就可以把它采回去当标本了，就研究是不是个新种。但是没有花的话，一般是不允许发新种的。对，所以时间稍微晚了一点。
这么远的路就是为了找它哈。
有点遗憾，应该早一点的，再找一找。
To identify plant species, flower is more reliable. Because other parts, like leaves, could differ due to environmental changes. But as reproduction organ, flower need to be as stable as possible to ensure the reproduction of offspring.
把物种划分清楚。首先要讲分类学原理，在这个基础上，来使这个物种啊精准化，数目它的分布这对生物多样性保护非常重要。
首先我们要知道这里有啥，我们才知道该保护啥，对吧？所以说植物志的编研工作是最基础性质的一个工作，可以为后续的不管是保护也好，资源的开发利用也好，提供最基础的一个原始的一个数据。
Today, flowering plants are the largest group in this kingdom. Also called angiosperms, they dominate most ecosystems, but they emerged rather recently in the geological timeline. But here, plants with ancient lineages abound.
这个苔藓非常多了。
Mosses and lichens are among the most primitive types of lives. They're believed to be among the first to survive on dry land. Before them, plants' ancestor had only experience of living in water. The new settlers needed to adapt to different conditions, especially to gravity. They could only lay low. But plants evolved and grew proper internal structures or vascular tissue to fight the force and hold themselves up. The tissues, like skeletons, allowed plants to grow larger and taller and to better access resources needed for survival. And a new species appeared in the Earth Flora collection: ferns. Their special features are hidden on the backside of their leaves.
孢子囊也是一种繁殖器官，就像我们有花植物的花儿或果实似的。所以我们采标本要翻过来要看，就是看有没有这个孢子囊。
These little sacs include countless single cells called spores. When spores germinate and spread, they heavily relied on moisture to allow the sperm to swim to the eggs and finish fertilization. This special need restricts their habitat. To outgrow their dependency on moisture and conquer more land, plants needed further innovation.
小黑哥，你看黑球果，果子冷杉，
啊，
朗山
是啊，
是哪一种啊？
我咋知道？吃过吧？
Firs have left a big footprint in the history of plants, as impressive as their size. The big evolutionary innovation came in these small cones, seeds.
来，它熟的时候会裂开，里面的种子就会裂开，像松树也松果一样的，它们是亲戚啊，跟松柏是亲戚。
Both firs and pines are called conifers. They produce cones which will open and expose the seeds after reaching maturity. Therefore, botanists call them gymnosperms, or naked seeds in Greek. Compared with spores, seeds has more complicated structures. This allowed them to pack in food, including protein and other nutrients, to help plants grow. The self-energy supply system is called endosperm, so seeds can stay dormant for many years if needed until they find the perfect conditions for germination. That also allow them to travel far away from their parent plants. Himalaya balsam has the bizarre nickname Touch Me Not. At the end of the seed pods is a sophisticated mechanical structure. A light touch can trigger an explosion. Now the seeds are on their way. Flowering plants, including balsam, represent the final stage of a plant evolution as we know it. Unlike conifers, which produce seeds in open cones, these plants grow their seeds in fruits for extra protection. But their trump card is the flower. Evolved reproduction begins when those flowers release pollen, and insects are involved in this process. To attract them, flowers diversified with arresting colors and alluring fragrances. But the biggest allure in the benefit package is the nectar. The flower of salvia has developed a sophisticated liver system.
上面的顶上那个花药就出来传粉，看到没？
When a bug sticks his head in to drink the nectar, the liver system is triggered, sneaking out 2 stamens from above and quietly smearing pollen on his back. Plants keep evolving to ensure their reproduction and survival, and once they secure their footing in Himalayas, an explosion of varieties began.
有很多很多的高山，彼此高山之间是有很深的峡谷。随着喜马拉雅山的一个隆起，它会造出很多很多小的深径，破碎化的深径。所以说，这会造成它们之间的基因交流会被切断。基因交流一切断，它就会向不同的方向去演化，这也会造成物种的数量会增加。
Animals feed on a variety of flowering plants, which in turn reap the benefits of seed dispersal. Humans utilize plants by cultivating them in vast fields, pollinating them deliberately, and consuming them with gusto. When the night falls, the most demanding task of the day is just beginning.
下一个。白天爬了一天山回来是挺累的，但是如果你不处理这些标本的话，会非常麻烦，因为标本它如果有水分没去掉，它会很快坏掉。那么第二天再压就压不了了，那相当于一天的工作爬山就白干了。它一双想不起来这个，没有花看到。
是新种吗？不是新种吗？
不是，
那就行了。
不是新种，是什么绿中那一类的，估计是。
绿中啊，
是个绿中的。
哦，
会回顾一下，包括白天在山上面知道这个东西是哪个科哪个属，但是种可能还需要鉴定，还不准确，所以回来拿到标本之后可能会 及时的查阅文献或者是电脑里面的数据库来查阅我们这个东西到底准确的种是什么种。
差不多了，差不多了。
所以就是说，当天采回来一定要把它全部压制完，放到烘机上面开始脱水，这样才能保证我们一天的爬山的工作的成果能够保存下来。采的多的时候才200毫的样子，这样子的话回来这个压制标本的工作量是很大的。正常情况下的150毫的量要干到半夜12点，如果是200多毫，那就是干到半夜1、2点去了。
The foothills of Himalayas are lush and verdant. But about 4,000 meters, the higher you go, the fewer the plants there are. It's getting cold and windy, and from above comes an invisible barrage of ultraviolet light. As the landscape gets dull, botanists find something attractive. Like a torch looming out of the mist. Snow lotuses.
我走了这么多地方，就是亚东这个片的高原雪人是最大的。
你看这么大兴奋不？
当然了，当然兴奋。
It's rare to see so many of them together, taking up the entire slope. Botanists believe this is how they've survived the strong winds here. But the most extraordinary part is these pale yellow leaves. They're not petals. Botanists call them bract-like leaves. These papery and translucent leafy bracts has fewer chlorophyll and enclose the flowers throughout their development. They then fall off after the fruits and seeds mature. That's the survival secret of the snow lotus.
有蜡质，有角质层，对，所以说你那个雨浇上去，人家不会说浇透了。
Scientists have found that bracts can keep out the ultraviolet light, but allow visible and infrared light to pass through and trap the resulting heat, just like the glass or plastic covers of a greenhouse.
研究测定过这个包叶雪莲的这个小温室的里面和外面的温度，里面会高出环境温度好几度。
The heat boosts pollen germination and seed development. And for insects, those plants might be the only cozy shelter in an unforgiving environment.
看到这些白白的了吗？这些白白的点儿，这就是虫的卵。它这是也是吸引这些小虫的一个方式。
对，
然后告诉小虫，我这暖和，快来啊！
我这暖和，你来，然后进去之后还有香味儿，哎，还有吃的。
我这又暖和又有吃的。
对，我这是个小旅馆，挺好的。
Larvae feeding on the seeds might be a downside, but that could be outweighed by the benefits of pollination by insects.
因为包片自己如果包起来，风是吹不到的，所以它的花粉出不来。出不来呢，如果有蚂蚁、昆虫进去呢，就可以把花粉带出来到另外一朵花里面去，就可以完成一个传粉的过程。
One thing is clear: humans did not invent the greenhouse first. Nature did. At this altitude, survival stories are not just written by plants. Near Lhasa, on this dry, wind-whipped steppes at an altitude of 4,500 meters, a plateau Pika peeks out of its burrow. They look like rats, but are actually closer to rabbits. Summer is the most enjoyable time of the year on the plateau. But those Pika cannot let their guard down, because they're on the menu of nearly everyone here. Rabbits' DNA helps them escape by taking advantage of burrow networks. They can dig up to 2,000 holes per hectare. On the surface, they look like Bilbo Baggins' hobbit hole in the Shire, but the complexity is beyond imagination. Some are simply meant for escape, and others are more complex, cozy homes. Danger is just one chapter of the Pika survival story. Competition is another. It's partly the result of living in a crowded family, but it also comes from something bigger. Himalayan yaks. The VIP customers of this grass buffet. Despite their huge size difference, scientists categorize them as rivals. But latest findings say their relationship developed to something more. When the short, frost-free season ends. How the Pika survives harsh winters has been a mystery. They don't migrate, hibernate, use extra body fat, or store grass in burrows like their American cousins. They skip nearly all winter strategies we have known so far. A recent analysis of Pika's gut content, however, revealed the presence of yak feces. This behavior, known as interspecific coprophagy, is quite rare among vertebrates, but makes sense. Yak dropping is a low-effort food source that allows the Pika both to save energy and protect themselves from the cold and predators. This diversified nature can establish any unlikely relationship. But those Pikas aren't what Jiangke is after. As the reptile expert, he is looking for a much rarer species. And is staring back at him. The Tibetan hot spring snakes, the highest living snake in the world.
这种高海拔地区是缺氧，外线非常强烈，在青藏高原这种比较恶劣的环境下，它都能够生存。那么这些适应能力就是吸引我们去研究的一个方向。
The snake's survival against the odds is the story of the creation of the plateau itself, which was situated at sea level eons ago.
现生的温泉蛇，它的最近的姐妹种是生活在美洲的低海拔地区。我们猜测呢，可能是由于青藏高原的隆升，然后而保留到现在的青藏高原面上。
Epic collisions between tectonic plates created the Himalayas. As the mountain thrust up, ancestors of those creatures were separated from their relatives and forced to embark on the cruel path of evolution. Most of their cold-blooded counterparts died due to the drop in temperature. But they survived, relying on a byproduct of mountain formation. Thermal springs strewed across this land. Deep below the surface, the mighty force of nature is still at work today. The turmoil below is reflected in clouds of sulfurous steam and boiling water, feeding its energy to the nearby rivers and streams.
他们利用这个地热温泉的这种热量来帮助他们度过这种青藏高原上比较寒冷的冬天。
Hanging out in those natural sauna looks pleasant, but what's beyond is endless freezing wilderness. Those cozy hot tubs are a haven, but also a prison. The spring also restricts their menu. Today, the snake is taking aim at this alpine frog. Hunting is underway. It waits patiently and approaches silently. a failed attempt.
1964年6月15号是个雄性啊，全长多少都有测量。
对，这应该就是新手发表的这模式。
Li Jiatang and Jiang Ke are members of the Second Tibetan Plateau Scientific Expedition, or STEP. The previous mission was in the 1970s, which involved their mentor, Professor Zhao Ermi, a pioneer of China's reptile research.
包括最初我们的老师像赵尔密老师，他们那个年代的话是用形态学来研究，从形态学的很多方面都回答了这些物种是如何在适应高原环境的。
这个是以前那个西藏的一个
第一次西藏高原科考，对我们包括对整个的生物多样性来说是非常非常重要的，因为在当时的情况下，基本是一个空白。那个年代下的老一批的科学家去调查哪些地方的生物多样性的丰富度啊怎么样，积累了大量的标本。从2000年前后，基因组学迅速发展，那使得我们能看一下到底哪些基因发生了改变，使得它能够在高海拔下生活下来。科学研究层层递进，慢慢的在深入下来。
Li's team was the first to decipher the complete set of genetic information, or genome, of hot spring snakes.
这是高海拔的蛇的基因组，同时我们也获得了低海拔的蛇的基因组，两者比较，我就能看到到底是基因组层面上哪些基因发生了变化。
They soon zoom in on one mutation, which reveals that a hot spring snake's ancestors survived the plateau not because they were lucky to come across the hot spring and settled, but because they were genetically designed to do so.
我们发现了一个叫 TROP-A1 的这个基因，在温泉蛇身上，它有个明显的突变。在相同的温度刺激下，它的热敏感性明显就跟别的不一样了，快速能够决断到这个地方是热源，所以它就找到了温泉。
To survive on a plateau, thin air is another challenge, not just for the snakes. Li's study confirmed that a genetic mutation to overcome low oxygen was shared among species.
EPAS1 基因，这个基因其实在恒温动物里边，像牦牛啊、像这个人啊等等这些物种里边呢是被发现了。第一次在蛇类这个变温动物身上找到了 EPAS1 这个基因的突变。
Mutations also keep their cells stable when exposed to ultraviolet radiation, when other cells would soon break down. That trait shields the snake's skin from the unforgiving sun.
我们眼睛看不到的遗传多样性背后呢，西藏的温泉蛇分为了两个比较重要的支系。低的遗传多样性的区域，我们就有花更多的这个精力可以去关注一下。那对于保护也是非常重要的。
With the help of genetic tools, scientists can now identify subtle differences between those snakes that are seemingly identical. This reminds them that those creatures continues to evolve quietly. Right here, right now.
这咱们出来2只都没修整过，连续奋战，所以很难找到机会跟家里视频。
你儿子给你发了个什么语音是不是？
对，上周发了一个语音，
听听看看。
上周发的语音，刚开始听前面都开始泪目了，后半句发现有那个风格又变了。
什么？他主动给你发的？
对。
爸爸，我很想你。要不大后天能回家吗？如果不能的话，也就算了。
对你不太抱希望了，我感觉对你完全失望了。
对，大后天能回家吗？不能回也就算了，无所谓了。这个 回去再陪陪了。哎呀。
Juan and his colleagues can now visit this area more frequently to discover new plant species. Making that possible are these growing road networks. Now, they're leading the team to the highest stop of their trip, Mount Chomolungma. At the base camp, few signs of life, reminding people that they're really on their own.
但高原的辐射是一个问题，还有一个更大的问题在珠峰的脚下，因为珠峰这片区域常年是7到8级大风，甚至12级大风。
But not all plants cower from the mountain cold and gusts. Like this rhubarb, which can hide its flower under the leaves to keep cozy. Or eriophyton growing out thick firs to stay warm. A similar strategy makes Sosaria the highest altitude flower in the world. And gentian lures geometry to shield UV light.
它可以把它的叶子通过一种叫啮合状排列的方式，排成非常标准的一个正方形，这样会极大的减少它的受光的面积，有效的防止那个紫外线对它的一个伤害。
To maximize chances of survival, the best strategy is to keep a low profile. And none is better at it than this one. They're not mosses, but cushion plants.
这是一个非常巨大的一个点地梅，整个非常大一个植株长在这样的一个砾石堆的上面，实际上它是很深的，啊，越深肯定保存的水分是越多的，咱们可以试试。好，这到头了，拔不出来了，拔不出来了，因为它非常的紧。 如果松它就保持不住水分了，所以它非常的紧，很多的分支聚在一起，后来这样出不来了。哎呀，可以看到上面有那种很明显很潮湿，很潮湿，就是它水分非常的多的。
Not only water, but also warmth and nutrients could be preserved within those comfy cushions. Temperature within remain relatively benign 5 to 7 degrees Celsius, as outside numbers fluctuate dramatically over the course of a day. Higher moisture favors microbial activity. In some cases, soil under contain 15 times as much humus as the rocky area near it. That's a sheltered mini ecosystem.
把它称为生态系统工程师，就是把原来很贫瘠的环境改造成适宜生活的环境，所以叫工程师嘛。
Here, cushion plants were the last remaining oasis of life, allowing other species to thrive.
因为非常的巨大，它可以保留非常多的水分和营养物质，然后所以说其他的像禾本科的、梭草科的植物，甚至包括这个唐松草，都可以长它上面，很好的生活。
This is a mini garden in this frontier environment. Scientists have found the diversity of plant species within those cushion domes could be about 30% higher than on the outside. Their presence is key to preserving the biodiversity of alpine areas. Paleontologists are fascinated by changes in biodiversity too, especially the cycles of flourishing life and extinctions through Earth's history. Scientists believe there were 5 great mass extinctions in history, including those in the Permian Triassic and Devonian periods. And some say the 6th is underway.
那么到底现在生物多样性处于一个大规模减少的阶段，还是基本处于一个正常的阶段？实际上是用现在的时间尺度来看，是我们很难看得清的。我们必须要研究整个地球历史的生物多样性的变化。
生命的演化，它必然是受到了当时的地球上的各种环境指标的影响，比如说气候。我们想要知道生命演化它的一个驱动机制是什么。
But even the top paleontologists have only a fuzzy view of Earth's natural history, which they have divided into huge chunks of 10 million years. That means they don't have detailed knowledge of any extinction or boom of life that occurred within those blocks of time.
细节问题看不到，尤其是一些突发性的变化看不到。而我们目前人类居住的地球，恰恰就是 要关注这些突发性的事件。
所有的历史其实都是靠这个我们叫岩石和岩石里面的这些化石来记录的。然后里面的化石呢，就告诉我们的信息就更生动一些。
Fossils are a key archive of the past, but they had been regarded only as curiosities, beautiful but worthless, until the 19th century, when British geologist William Smith found the code hidden in the rocks. He discovered that superficially identical strata, or distinct layers of rocks, actually differed in their fossil content.
总有一个规律，就有些东西它老是在那个下面的，就是靠下的那个岩石里面；有些东西它总是在靠上的岩石里面。然后它整体的这个出现的顺序永远都一致。它把这个就叫做化石层序率。
Scientists started to realize the fossils could work as page numbers of a book to bring order into chaos. But they need to solve one big problem first.
绝大部分的以前的史前生物是不会保存的化石的。我们现在看到的这个化石，就完全是以前那个世界的很小的一部分。
As a result, it can be hard to tell whether changes in the fossil records mark real shifts, such as mass extinctions, or are simply caused by a lack of evidence. This gap has been filled by a recent attempt to bring Earth history into sharp focus. Professor Fan Junxuan was leading a team to mine a new database of more than 100,000 records belonging to over 11,000 fossil species. They're relying on one of the world's most powerful supercomputers, the Tianhe-2.
每一个点代表的就是一个计算核心，所以说这样的话，我们就可以非常清楚地看到，当前的计算是在逐渐的变好。
Fan hopes to unleash the intensive computing power of the Tianhe-2 to uncover the hidden pattern by integrating fossil data as much as they can in order to compensate for the lack of fossil records. The machine didn't disappoint him.
因为本身当你的数据量这么大了之后，这个分辨率的提升肯定会是惊人的，但是能够提高到2.6万年还是比较出乎我们的意料的。
From 10 million years to 26,000 years, that's 400 times in resolution improvement. The result? Breathtaking details.
就像我们讲的，我们用肉眼去观察我们周围的世界，和我们用这种电子显微镜去观察我们的世界，那你看到的这个世界都会截然不同的。
Detail has been added to a long-known extinction, arguably the darkest moment in Earth's natural history.
最显著的这条线就代表的是我们目前所认识到的地球上面最大规模的一次生物大灭绝，就发生在2.5亿年左右的2叠纪末的一次生物大灭绝事件。
这次灭绝事件呢，导致差不多81%的海洋的物种灭绝，而且时间非常短，只有大概6万年左右这样一个时间范围之内。
The findings also cast doubt on one of the 5 great mass extinctions in the late Devonian, suggesting that it may not have happened at all.
泥盆纪晚期的一次事件，实际上是一个很长的生物多样性的一个下降的过程，而不是在某一个点上一个突然的下降。
从我们这次的研究的结果来看，可能这个时候它那个所谓的生物灭绝的那个程度，或者叫生物量的这个减少，并没有那么明显。
那么当你的分辨率下降之后，我们就会发现生命演化过程中间的一些规律就会消失，甚至于会变成一些错误的一些模式。也就是说，分辨率必须要足够高，它才能够真正的帮我们去揭示生命演化的实际的这种规律所在。
As the new curve reveals more secrets hidden from Earth's past, scientists wish to match those ups and downs on a timescale with climatic shifts in history. That will help us better answer one question than ever before. Is today's climate change driving us to a new biodiversity catastrophe?
如果我们反过去看，在地球历史过程中间是不是这样的规律呢？如果是，那就证明很有可能就表明我们现今的生物多样性危机是真实存在的。那么如果要是地质过程中间发生过多次的大气二氧化碳含量更高，甚至于全球更暖，生物都没有灭绝，那也许我们可以更加客观地认识我们现今的生物多样性的危机。
2/3 of the trip is over, but Wang Jiang still hasn't found what he needs the most:
整个蜘蛛也就10个公分高的样子，不会特别高，不超过20个公分应该。
He has been looking for Tibetan skullcaps and prostrate skullcaps, 2 of the highest altitude skullcaps in the world.
行，向前开。看样子这一块是找不到了。
Since their discovery over 100 years ago, they've rarely been seen in the wild.
旁边这路边这个森林就很像。
这种像，对面那个好像。
To find a plant that tiny, the most effective way is to lock down its habitat.
我们看找一找。
杨叔，这块像了吗？
这块森林非常像了。哦。有过相采呀。
这个基本上就是跟那个我们目标中就相伴的，就那个一起出现的，所以
这是什么东西啊？
已经快了。这个叫做西藏纽货香。
Lotuses。
如果发现它，就能说明有点问题了。就说明整体生境对了，然后只要我们开始找。
他们是邻居，跟藏红旗是邻居，所以他就很可能找到另外一个。没有。再往前再换点儿，再换一个类似环境的，看有没有。
这儿已经很像了吧？
环境很像了，但是运气不好。
应该快了吧？
应该快了，有希望。暂时吃点甜的安慰一下。虽然没有找到藏黄旗，有点失落，但前面是有希望的。看这些坡上随时瞄着。
像这个东西是一根苗啊，还是说一长一堆啊？
还是可以长成一片，所以说如果有就能够碰得到应该，但没有就没办法了。而且是这边坡上，
就那边的坡上，
还是坡上看看。
对，等一下，就是这边也是有可能的，这附近，要么我就停嘛，我们走过去也行。
找到了，开花了，太帅了，找到了。虽然不是藏黄芩，但是它是它的亲姐妹平卧黄芪。哦，对咱也很重要。在珠峰地区是第一次发现，说实话，很不容易，很不容易。长得多美呀！你看这个花儿多好看呀！
生儿子的时候也没这样吧？
差不多，差不多。
As Wang Cheng predicted, once you find one,
哇塞，哦，好，
一片一片，
先拍照。
you can find them all.
下面就在近点里再找2个点，找藏黄芪，找到就更加开心了，今晚上就得庆祝了。
基础科学研究呢，一个很大的含义就是让我们探秘自然，来揭示自然，了解自然的规律。
我们希望有一天能够把整个地球生命历史当中生物多样性的变化过程，以一种高分辨率的方式能够把它展示出来。
这么乖啊！哦，今天是教师节是吧？哦。好，谢谢。
这样的研究呢，往往看不到短期的效应，但是应该看到生物多样性保护是一个长远的一个事业，来不得着急。